Before I get to do a very pleasurable introduction, I saw the program on Saturday. I mean, I knew it would be good. I saw it. I was hooked after the third image, as you will be this morning. So look forward to something really, really good on a topic that is tough, but you got to know about. So with that being said, some housekeeping. Handle your cell phones, please. If you do that, I greatly appreciate that. For your parking ticket, when you leave, if you say you're part of the John Arrow program, it's $10 flat charge. If you stay for lunch at Red 7 down in the green building, your parking goes to $7.50. And this is Arrow Architectural number 5. It's the last one for the year. We have 11 scheduled for 2012. Most likely the second Monday of every month. We're trying to keep to a consistent date. Not confirmed yet, but you will get confirmed dates. Wonderful speakers on the caliber that you'll hear today and the past 4 speakers. So look forward to that. It's pretty exciting to get together. Speakers are beginning to call us, so you know we're on to something when that happens. So with that being said, I get to welcome this morning's speaker. And his name is Rocky Rockefeller, AIA, who has been practicing architecture for 31 years. He's the senior partner of Rockefeller Partners Architects, which was established almost a decade ago. He began with a degree in construction technology, and then he would later earn an architecture degree from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Then, and you're going to know this name, he would then work for the noteworthy case study firm Killingsworth, Brady, and Associates down in the South Bay, and he would assist on residential, hospitality, and mixed-use projects. So currently, we're at 2011 now, in addition to designing estates for moguls and celebrities in the Hollywood and West Side Hills, his firm is adept in the complex and challenging requirement of historic adaptive reuse as well. He's also coordinated and managed large teams of consultants and design professionals. He sees projects through from conception to construction, and as he likes to say, from cradle to grave and beyond. I'm not sure what the beyond part is, but maybe he'll tell us. Rocky, you also may know from another venue, because since 1987 he has taught at the UCLA Extension in the Architecture and Interior Design Master's Degree program, where he was twice named as Outstanding Instructor of the Year. And I can see why he would after Saturday's meeting. So this is all an eloquent way of saying that he knows what he's talking about. And when I saw the presentation on Saturday, I was hooked, as I said, after the third image. Right now, mentally, think in terms of 17th century France as the origin of anti-Mansionization. It relates to LA today. And finally, don't take notes. Because if you give me a business card, Rocky will send you this morning's presentation with the images via email. And at the end of his talk, I know we're all on tight schedules. We'll be ending about noontime. You're welcome to go on about your day, or you can stay for questions and answers with Rocky's associate, Chris Hempel, right there, and where they can answer your specific questions. Also, before you leave, the firm has brochures in the back that are very well done. I encourage you to take one of those. And with all that being said, I'd like to welcome Rocky Rockefeller. And we'll do lights.
That's a lot to live up to. No pressure, Brad. Thanks.
Well, and I even left out half the stuff.
Yeah, you did. It'll be a very short lecture. Today we are going to talk about a lot of topics. Let's see if I can make this thing work. We're going to talk a little bit of history, as Brett said, first, to kind of get you in the swing of things, because it's very difficult to talk about Mansionization without sort of first talk about the Hillside Ordinance, without first talking about Mansionization, and give you a little background as to how we got to this point, and how we got to where a city is imposing guidelines on you to build your house. So we'll talk a little bit about anti-Mansionization and how that ticked up and included the Hillside Ordinance, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with a little discussion about if you're going to remodel or build new in the hills, what happens and what the impacts are on your clients and on you. And then, like Brett said, we'll do a little Q&A. So first, a little bit of history. You might recognize this, some of you. As Brett said, 17th century France. This is Versailles. It's a small place. Probably the largest palace ever built. Amazing. Probably first major act of insurrection against mansions by the French. It started as a little quaint hunting lodge, if you can imagine that, right? Little quaint hunting lodge under Louis XIII. Well, Louis XIV stepped in and said, oh no, it's not going to be little, it's going to be big. They set out on 4 major building campaigns. And some of you art buffs will know Charles Lebrun, who was the great artist, painter, and sort of directed a lot of the work along with an architect and a landscape architect. But he really led the charge, and for about 40 years, they spent money like it was water. They made our houses here in LA look like paupers' fields. They spent, in today's money, over $2 billion with a B. Now, that does not include the labor, unfortunately. That was really just the materials. They have furniture cast out of solid silver. And as you might recognize, all mirrors, beautiful stuff. Oh, they had a lot of windows to clean. They had over, I don't know, 700,000 square feet of building at one point. And towards the end of the 1600s, they actually moved out of Paris and moved to Versailles. They said, Paris is a drag. It's the biggest city on earth. It's crowded. There's plagues. There's wars breaking out on one end we can't get to. And so as a major cosmopolitan area, they decided they were going to move the government seat, to Versailles. So they're a little removed now and continue to spend money. And eventually stuff like that catches up with you, you know. So almost 2,000 windows, a little over 2,000 windows. A lot of windows to wash. They had 6,000 pieces of art, 5,000 pieces of furniture, all commissioned and built for this lavish palace to make it look like the best thing ever on earth, which it probably was. As things go, you know, you get old, you die. Louis XIV passed away. The 15th came in, kept on building, and then eventually he died, and Louis XVI took over. And when Louis XVI took over, you may remember, he's 15 years old. He marries a girl that's a foreigner. 14 years old. They don't have a kid right away because, you know, they just couldn't figure it out. So things are pretty nasty in Paris. If you don't know, people are dying. They estimate that Paris had a 50% unemployment. We complain about 10%. 50%, you've got anarchy. Prices were spiraling out of control, so bread is very hard to come by. And it starts smacking of the fall of the Roman Empire all of a sudden. So what happens is they decide they don't like the king because he never seems like he's got a grip. He gets out in public and he seems weak. They hate his wife. So what do? If I can make this work. My thing's not working. They put him in the guillotine. The only standing king to ever get his head cut off in France. Not a pretty picture. So no more king. So that leads the way to the whole, you know, revolution. You all saw Les Miserables, right? Okay, picture that. So on with that. So really the first real example of anti-mansionization and the ire that it brings up for people that don't have. So that kind of leads us into some thoughtful thinking about LA, but not on the same scale, really. So let's move forward about 100 years. Chicago, another city growing out of control. 1880, it's a small town, 300,000 people. 1900, it's like 1,000,001. 1910, it's 2.2 million people. It's growing out of control. There's a big fire in the 70s, burns the place to the ground, and they make up some rules. And this guy comes along, Daniel Hudson Burnham, who is someone of noteworthy. You know the Flatiron Building in New York, you all must know that. That beautiful wedge-shaped stone building. That's his work. Burnham and Root, classic firm, very well respected. They did a few other noteworthy things like Union Station in New York, right? You've all been there, you've seen it, or at least on TV. But he was also what we would consider a major land planner. He actually was brought into places like San Francisco after the fire and helped them create the whole new plan for San Francisco. He went to Washington, D.C. to sort of pick up after Oliphant and figure out why there was all this congestion and problems in D.C. and help sort out D.C. to what we know today. But his most notable work is Chicago. His master plan for Chicago is sort of the seminal battle cry for planners all over the world from then on. Planners up to that point really didn't exist. But something a little interesting came along the way when they were trying to create this plan, and that's that there was this little event in Chicago called the World's Columbian Exposition, 1893, something like that. You can read it up there. 1893, we got all kinds of great things out of that. It became one of those galvanizing events in America. America was still sort of in a funk after the Civil War. They hadn't really got it together yet. America in general had about 65, 67 million people living in it. 27.5 million people went through the World's Columbian Fair in one summer. Who planned all this? Burnham. Burnham had a grip. He really understood planning. And he is considered by, I think, most planners as sort of the father of planning in America. He put this whole thing together in a very short period of time. If you ever get a chance to read the book Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, anybody read that? Fabulous book, yeah. It sort of moves a couple things in. There's also murder and intrigue. There's a lot of things going on in that movie. But I can't wait till it's a movie. But anyway, it's a lot of things came out of the World's Fair, but not the least of which is the planning. So as you can see, there was a Japanese pavilion. This is some of the other stuff. It was dubbed the White City because all the buildings were painted white. And to this day, you hear people talk about in the airport, hey, I'm going to the White City. You're like, what the heck is a White City? Well, Chicago's been dubbed the White City for years since then. So Burnham, he sort of brought the whole country forward. He dragged them all kicking and screaming. All these people came through. The Japanese pavilion that was here is noteworthy because a couple of people you might know, especially here in LA, Frank Lloyd Wright, anybody heard of him? Or the Green Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Both of them, all three of those, claim that their tour through the Japanese pavilion was sort of a earth-shattering experience for them. It put them on a new track, a new plane as architects. It changed the way they looked at architecture. And you can see their work shift dramatically after the fair. So very interesting stuff. So I think, Ferris wheel, the Midway, shredded wheat, all that stuff was introduced at this fair. But I think the most important part was that it actually created land planning goals that carried on. And of course, the master plan for the city of Chicago, even to this day, is followed by city planners and people in council district. They will say, what does the Burnham plan say on this subject when somebody's trying to build a new building? You'll notice it's very well controlled against the lake. It's very placid, a lot of parks, and very well controlled. So about the same time, we have the huddled masses, as the Statue of Liberty says, plowing over the ocean in boats like this, crowded to the hilt, showing up in another big city, New York. Now, New York, interesting, about the same time, 1880, it was a fairly quaint town, 1.2 million people. But it grew quickly. And by 1900, it was 3.5 million people. You can imagine cramming that many people so quickly. Things start to change. And eventually, by 1920, there was over 6 million people living in New York City. That's staggering. I mean, you consider LA only has 4 million people today. Think about having that many people crammed into a much smaller footprint and into those buildings. It must have been really something. So you see, some of the tenements and so forth that came up, they started crowding people. People were just jammed in. So crime, disease, unsafe conditions, big bulky buildings being built, all connecting up to each other. People lived in rooms with no windows, no air, no light. You know, it gets a little warm in New York. You ever been there in the summer?
Yes.
People got a little upset. They didn't have air conditioning, remember? Not yet. So they protested really loudly, and about this time, about 1900, the state of New York, they actually came in and made a new law. And they said that if you're going to build a residence, I don't know why I can't make this work, but if you're going to build a residence, that it has to be a certain size, has to have light and air, that sort of thing. Very minimal ideas of planning, but they did step in. And then in 1915, a commercial building, not anything to do with this residential ordinance, a commercial building got built. Beautiful building, over 550 feet tall, 42 floors. It is built property line to property line. We're all realtors, right? We know what that means. It's like your neighbor next door building right to the wall of their property and then building 550 feet vertical. The interesting thing about this building, you'll never guess, it casts a 7-acre shadow. The people living in this town next to this building never saw the sun again. Were they upset? Do you know any New Yorkers? Okay, very upset. So New York City was in a tizzy. So along came this new rule, New York City zoning regulation. This is the first real zoning regulation in the United States. 1916, they said, okay, if you're going to do that, there's going to be restrictions even on commercial buildings. So the commercial buildings had to start to change, and this is probably the best example of that wedding cake design. You get the Empire State Building and, of course, the unbelievably gorgeous Chrysler Building. And you can see the base is big, but as it comes up, it gets smaller, and it lets the light go through it, it lets the air blow around, and it makes for a nicer city. So a little bit of a lead up, but that gets us started. At least we're in the wheelhouse now. We understand maybe what mansionization is all about. It's about people being upset. It's about people not liking having something really big built next to them, I guess. So I'm used to it. I live in Hermosa Beach. It's pretty crowded. But so we're in Los Angeles, beautiful city, and we've got some growth. We continue to grow. We're pushing 4 million people just in LA. When you look at our land area, it's big, right? LA's a big city. We got 469 square miles of city. That's a big city by anybody's standards. And we're probably in one of the most populated metropolises on the earth when you count in Long Beach, LA, Santa Ana, that whole area glommed together. It's a lot of people, over 12, almost 13 million people at this point in that one zone. So very dense. And if you count the county, you're up to about 4,000 square miles. So what is mansionization anyway? And I think we need to talk about this because this word's been hanging around LA for, gosh, at least 5 or 6 years. We've been hearing about it. It's on the radio. People are ranting and raving. Neighborhoods are getting up in arms. And, you know, people in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica kind of smirk and say, we don't have that problem. Right? But LA, different. So I guess it would be defined as new construction, additions, and remodels on residentially zoned lots that are out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood. That's anti-mansionization. That's what a mansion is. It's something that's too big. So we got that down. So what does that mean? Well, I think a lot of us think it means something like this. There goes the neighborhood. This is actually a pretty true rendition of what they actually are like. But, you know, not the sign. Usually there's not a sign on it. So. But it is this. I know it's a pretty blurry picture, but you can see here, I don't know how many of you can see this, but you can see this house. It's pretty much the Equitable building. It's property line to property line with like a little 3-foot or 5-foot side yard. And it's straight up. So it is one of those interesting things in LA. It's legal. You're allowed to build it in the old days. And that's why people got upset. Especially the guy down here in front. See that guy? Wow. That must be pretty ugly. So it's massive. And about late 2005, there was a certain group of people that had just had enough and didn't want to see it anymore. So they went to all their respective council offices. In LA, we got a lot of them, right? 15. And started yelling at them. And some of these guys didn't like being yelled at. You know, they're council people. I got 275,000 people under me. There are state senators in many states that don't have near that constituency. So LA city council people have a lot of constituency. So they sort of set in motion a bunch of stuff that's happened over the last 5 or 6 years. And one of those, you can see, stuff like this they wanted to avoid. It's a Stuart Little house.
I was just going to say that.
And then along came Tom LaBonge and picked up the banner. And a lot of you know Tom LaBonge, I'm sure. He's local here in sort of this iconic area of LA. He proposed a motion to the city that he would have the city planners establish appropriate size to lot ratios. Seems simple enough, right? Well, that set off sort of a torrent and a war, essentially. And there was Sunland Tujunga had their problems, and they had probably brought it to the forefront. But now with LaBonge as sort of a catalyst, things started to really fall in place. And so he addressed the mansionization of the McMansions with his proposal. And by 2008, we had a new ordinance. And it was the Anti-Mansionization Ordinance. And it's what started limiting what you could build on a residentially zoned property. And you've all been down that road now because you sell property. You've probably been there. And somebody said, well, how big of a house can I build on that? And I'm like, well, let me look at it. Let me look into it. I'll get back to you. It's a tough one. What do you do? Today we're going to sort of dispel all that and try to get into how you actually can tell somebody that stuff. So the city had established this new regulation for these R-zone, and it affected everybody, not just some. It affected Hancock Park. It affected Bel Air. And it affected the hills above Sunset, Hollywood Hills, Brentwood, all that stuff. So a lot of people took notice. So how many houses was this actually going to, I can't make my thing work. How many houses was this zoning going to actually affect? Well, the Anti-Mansionization Ordinance actually affected over 300,000 lots, residential lots. I don't know, how many people knew there was over 300,000 residential lots in LA? Probably a lot of you. There's actually a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But this is the flatlands. So this ordinance, the day it was signed into law in 2008, immediately you lost from what used to be like 3 to 1, and it's somehow been cut down to maybe 1.5 to 1, to something that was like 1/2 to 1. So instead of building that house you saw before that was probably easily 15,000 feet, you can now build maybe only half of your 5,000 foot. And that upset people a lot. I've lost my ability to build and sell. So it's a flat lot ordinance, but it's the step up to what we eventually got, which was the Hillside ordinance. So let's go through the flat lot ordinance and just see how it goes, and I think it'll make the Hillside ordinance a lot easier to understand. So here's the map. You can see, here's my I lost my pointer. Here's LaBonge, okay? And here's Beverly Hills. And you all know Santa Monica down here. And of course, where I live is way down here somewhere. But you can see each of these numbers represent the council district. So if you find your councilman, he's Council District 5, there he is, 11's there, 4's there. So you can start to see how this lays out. But LaBonge has some teeth in him, right? I mean, he's got Griffith Park, he's got all Larchmont, Hancock Park, he's got the Hollywood Bowl, I mean, all Hollywood Hills. He's got all this stuff in his district that are almost iconic. He's even got, the Hollywood sign in his district, so he's something. So along came LaBonge, and he carried this placard, and he said, "This is not enough." But let's look at what it was. The baseline mansionization actually split up all the R-zoned lots and said, here's what we really got. Now, this is not, I don't want you to get hooked up on the numbers, but you probably all sold a lot and said, oh, it's an RE15. I'm sure you all know what that is, but for those that maybe don't, that's residential. The R is residential. The E is estate. And the 15 means how many square feet the lot needs to be. 15, so 15,000 square feet. So you can see you've got less of those. Then you've got this blue thing, which is the 5,000 foot R1 typical. There's a lot of them. So you see there's 234,000 of those. So you start to look at this. The city of LA actually said, okay, let's commission a study by our city planners. Let's go through and actually look at every single parcel in Los Angeles. 450,000 residential parcels they went and looked at.
and classified them and checked out the classifications. And it's probably hard to see this map, but let me see if I can make it. This is a blow up of it. So you can start to see, they start to look at every block, and every block is zoned, and you can start to tell that, you know, those orangish, brownish ones, those are the R1s, of course. And the greens are the big ones. Those are the RE20s and 40s and 15s. So, officially, in June of 2008, Villa Grossa signed it into effect, and we've got an ordinance. And it includes something called the floor area ratio, the FAR. And I think probably it's worth explaining at least, because I'm sure some people here don't know what an FAR is. But FAR is the amount of house you can build relative to the size of your lot. That's as simple as you can make it. So the floor area ratio includes some things that, like on an R1 lot, the smallest of those, the little brown and yellow ones. You got 5,000 foot lot, you can build 50% of that. And then there's some bonuses allowed. So you can get a little bonus, 20% bonus on that, so you can actually build a 3,000 foot house. And you get a garage. So maybe you're up to 3,500 now. But they've got rules. Here's the way it breaks down. You can see, and I'll email this chart to all of you, but you can see that the big lots, you can build a bigger house. And if your square footage gets bigger, you can build bigger yet. So if you're an RE40 and you got a bigger lot, which we'll go into in a minute, you can build a bigger house. So there's some allowable bonuses, and this is one of them that the city handed out, so I stuck it up there for you. But if you, and you can only take a bonus one time, but there's a series of bonuses. One is if you step back the second floor, or you make it smaller, and this sounds like what to you guys? I'm sure you all heard of this before. Santa Monica, maybe? Yeah. West Hollywood? They've all got it, right? So LA caught up. Another bonus would be like to step back part of the facade. So a portion of your front facade gets pushed back 20% of the depth of the house. Or maybe you do your house under the new green standards. And when this first came out in 2008, it was a LEED thing. And if you all know USGBC, LEED standards, that's what it was then. Now, City of LA has a green building code. Just because I don't have enough books in my office, we had to add another one. So now we get to read that one. It's a very fun book to read. But it's good. So they also started lowering the heights of the buildings they would allow. It used to be you could build 36 feet everywhere. And then it came down and down and down. In some places, you know, we got one-story zones in LA now. We got 28-footers. And they started to, again, continue to limit grading. They've been trying to limit grading for a long time, but they really got into it now. The actual dirt under your house doesn't count, but the grading around the house is what they're getting into. So here's something that's kind of interesting. Let's look at where the arrow is, and we'll see who can figure out this one. But you've got an RE40 zone lot. That's one of the biggest ones. And you've got a property in the middle column is over 200,000 square feet. So relatively, you're allowed, if you remember the chart before, if we can go back one or two, you remember that chart before, it said you could build something like, I don't know, 16,000. But it scales. So it's actually a 52,503 square foot house on there, depending on what you look at or who you trust. And then you see there's two blue stars. Those are actually, when they did their study, they found two properties in the R20 and the R40 that they couldn't have rebuilt under the new ordinance. But that was it. Everything else you could still build. So it wasn't like the sky is falling yet. Yeah, we'll get to that. So I know you all recognize this. Kind of fun. It's the Spelling Mansion. It's the second, I understand from my good friend Brett, it's the second most expensive house in the United States, right? Second, unfortunately. We like to be first here, but I guess we're second. It was zoned RE40. As you see by the plan, it was actually a combination of three properties, and this is right out of the City of LA website, so you can all do this stuff. But you can see roughly the plan of the house, and you can see that 100-car garage, and you can start to see where the pool is and things like that. So they combined three lots. They came up with 200,000 square feet. And what I find the most amazing is that, and I'll go back, is that under the Mansionization Ordinance, you could not only build this house, you could build a bigger house. You could go to 82,000 feet and still be legal. So, Mansionization, yeah, but it isn't killing everybody. Small lots, yeah, it's tough. 3,000 feet on a 5,000 foot lot, you're gonna have a lot of people push it back, and we do. We're architects, we hear it all. But you have the bonuses, you have the garages, you try to work it out. So it is forcing us to be more designers. We have to be more clever with our design. We have to be more careful with how we put the space together. We have to make every room count. So that is one thing. But I thought it was a good example to see that on the big properties, it isn't hurting us. So, okay, so let's start talking about, we got through the sort of anti-mansionization. Now let's start looking at Hillside. And the Hillside ordinance didn't come till later. It's like May of this year before we got it signed into law. It took them a while. And they had, I think I had 13 or 14 public meetings, which, anybody go to any of those meetings? Sort of like anarchy. There were the sides, the haves and the have-nots. There were the sides that didn't want it, the sides that did want it. And you got people who are very passionate. And I've got to tip my hat to the City of LA. They really took control. They did a lot of studies. Did 3 years of studies trying to make this all work out. And they made sure that everybody could build something. So let's go through it a little bit. This is the greater LA basin. What do you notice about the greater LA basin is we got a lot of hills and mountains. We got a lot of them. It's part of the great thing. You can surf in the morning and ski in the afternoon. But it's also got its sort of problematic parts to it, right? A lot of hills. The baseline Hillside ordinance tried to protect the beauty that we have in the hills. They're trying to say you can't build the biggest house possible on the steepest site out there. Couple things. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the Big Rock slide, but we do have tricky soil in some places. If you're buying or selling a property in the canyons, what happens? Everybody wants to see a soils report. They want to know, can we build on this thing? You know, we got involved in a couple of projects through the years. By the time they got a soils report and found out there's no way you're putting a house on this, you can't build 300-foot deep piles. What are you going to do? So we need to do our diligence and find those things out. But there is a lot of hills. So the city went and commissioned their planners, and there are lots of planners in the city of LA, and they did their work, and they came up with this map. And if your property's in green, you're a hillside. A lot of us are concerned about this, and you can see what they did though. Here's out in the valley. The red line is the old hillside line, and the green is the new hillside. The city, before they started this survey and this study, had almost 275,000 lots, properties, residential properties, designated as hillside. When they got done with this, they had 133,000. That's a big number still, but it's half of what it was before. And yes, we would go to the counter and say, look, it's in a hillside, but it's dead flat. Why are you making us abide by hillside standards? And they'd say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll sign that off. Great. So it is still a lot of houses, and they're still controlled by this ordinance. So it's worthy of talking about. If you want to know if your property, I'm sure you all do this, but go to Zima's. LA City has amazing websites, believe it or not. One thing you get with a big city with 10 times the properties that any other city around has, or 20 times, is you get a lot of people in there that can do things like build websites. Zima's pretty interesting. You get these reports, and you can see right there, hillside area is owned, yes. Tells you how big the property is. And based on this and a few other little things, we can actually get pretty close on a hillside and tell you if you can build 10,000 feet or 5,000 feet in pretty short order, which is good for us in LA. Other cities, some cities, you don't have that luxury. Okay, so this is a little different FAR. They still call it the FAR, but it's based on the slope of your property. So they call it the slope band method. And they also put a few other clinkers in the, sorry, this is really in my face. They also put a few other things that try to maintain control in the hillsides. They want to monitor additions, got limits on how big the additions can be before it starts to become the whole new house. They limit the height, the number of stories, and they severely limit the grading. So the FAR, again, the building and structure size will be based on the lot size, zoning, and steepness of the slope, right out of the city code. It's different for every property. So it's hard now to say if you've got an RE9, what size you're going to build, because you've got to go study the slope. In fact, if you're going to do a new house or even remodel a house on a hillside property, you have to have a survey now. The city requires a licensed surveyor to do a topographic survey. So may be obvious to some of you, but it bears explaining that the FAR gets smaller as the hillside gets steeper. So think of it when you go out there to put the stake in the ground and say for sale, if you can't walk up that slope, it's going to be a little house. So here's the way it looks. If you see this, you see the bigger numbers like the 1-to-1 and the 100%, and you see the smaller numbers down here, 60%, 45%, 30%, and all the way down to 15%. So you can imagine trying to walk up that angle. Just imagine yourself walking up there. The lower angles, bigger houses. Steeper angles, smaller houses. Pretty straightforward. This is how the slope band works. So they make us go in, they create a chart, and made it very easy for us to figure out. It's really not that complicated. We get a survey, use their chart, we pretty much can tell you exactly what you got to build. The slope band 0 to 15 is flat to moderate. That is the anti-mansionization, the flat land, that is a flat lot. If you don't have more than a 15% or 8.5 degree slope, you're essentially a flat lot, and you don't have to comply with the Hillside Ordinance. But if some of your lot has the stronger slopes, or the very strong slopes, or the extreme slopes, then you're hooked into that. Okay, so here's back to our lovely chart. I know you probably hate looking at charts. I know I do. But here you go. So look at this. It shows that the slope in the shadow, and it's shaded in, that's essentially all those 300,000 flat lots. And if you go down, you start to see how your FAR, the amount of house you can build, becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of your total lot. So if your lot is 5,000 feet, but you can only build 30% of it, you got a much smaller house. Now again, they've got bonuses, and they've got by right. So I know some of us are freaking out, but let's look at the slope analysis, how it comes. We get a topographic survey on the left. We start to build a model on the right. You do this example, this analysis, and you see which of the contours in the topographic map are in what slope band. And it seems complicated at first, but when you focus on it, it starts to become very clear. You see those really dark brown ones? That's goat country. You got to be careful. But you see that in this case, and I think they came up with a house they could build was 8,540 feet, because they had a relatively good sized pad up on the top. Here's where our surveyor sends us. They send us this in the same fashion. The city requires that you either do it in color or you do it with hatching. And surveyors, they're not good with color, so most of them give it to you hatching. So it's hatched, same thing. You probably can't read the slope band analysis, but the city requires that the surveyor prepare this chart. And this chart looks like this. Matches up with their thing. And there you go. So in this case, if we were going to build this house in the flats with that much property, we would probably have about a 5,300 square foot house. Here, we can build a 4,500 square foot house, not including the garage. So people were still up in arms, and I know one of these particular hearings and meetings that I went to that the city put on, it was close to anarchy, and the city said, no, there's going to be a minimum you can build on every lot. So there is no unbuildable lot, unless the geology is bad, but there is no unbuildable lot. And so in an R1, they say you can build at least a 25% of your lot. So if it's 5,000 feet, that's 1,250 feet, plus a garage of 400. You still got a very small house. But you can build a house. I don't know why my clicker doesn't work. Okay, so they also allow for some bonuses. And there are some caveats to these bonuses. I just want to say, they do give you a running chance to try to make it work. So again, the proportional story option is not always available on hillsides. There are some restrictions. You got to have a certain amount of flat pad to make it work. Same with the front facade step back option. Doesn't always work in Hillside. So they throw it out there, but it's not always applicable. But then you get into the rest of the list, the cumulative side yards, where you can actually build larger side yards on one side or the other, or split it on both, and you get a bigger house by 20%. Same with keeping your height down to 18 feet. Sounds like Malibu, doesn't it? Yeah. Those of you that sold properties in Malibu, Malibu's got a pretty rigorous height restriction. You've all seen the story poles, right? And all that ludicrous stuff you got to put up. Same with Pasadena. So, and then they got the multiple structures option, and they got the minimal grading option, where you do almost no grading. You conform to the land, which is good. I mean, it's a good way to go. It's harder for us. We got to design something that way, but I think it's the right thing to do. And then, of course, the green building option again, same kind of option. So, if you look at height limits, they're different. Used to be everything had 36 feet. Now you see it's dropped off. The R1s, we got some zones now that are down at 22 feet and 18 feet. Those little numbers there on the left, they come after your R1 dash whatever, right? You've all seen that. And that's really starting to knock some stuff down. So some of those small, quaint, one-story, bungalow heaven-esque type properties, if you go to Pasadena, it's one-story land up there in bungalow heaven. You're going to have low heights. You can't build very tall. So here's an example. This is up at a Mandeville site. This is a very steep site, but you can start to see how the height limit is now allowed to be a terraced height limit. You can actually, they actually call it the slope model, and the envelope height is pretty much follows the terrain. So we thought, okay, that's very interesting. I think that to talk about hillsides, we do have to step back a little bit and say, you know, there's going to be some things we're going to miss. We're going to miss out on that we used to have. Things that were iconic and made LA what it was. And we're not going to be able to do that anymore. So we're going to have to become more creative. Things like John Lautner in his sort of iconic spaceship, the Chemisphere House, named so after the company that sponsored them to help them get over their budget bust. As long as they let them use it for events and call it the Chemisphere House, they gave them some extra money so they could finish building the house that they were under budget on. This column in the middle is the only structure to support it to the ground. It's 3 foot in diameter. It's 50 feet tall. You park down below, you get the funicular, and it takes you up to a gangplank. And it sort of feels like a ship when you get inside. It's got these big groin-shaped glue lamps. And amazing. But you're never going to build that today. Not unless somebody really loves you for some reason. Could happen, I suppose. Inside, it's pretty amazing the view you get from that house. You are definitely in sort of a bird's nest, and it's an amazing house. I had a great experience. I had John Lautner, who's the architect of this house, who was a disciple of Frank Lloyd Wright. He got to LA by building houses for Frank Lloyd Wright. And one year when I was at Cal Poly back in the 70s, believe it or not, I know I look like I'm 10, but 20 miles of bad road. We had a guest professor, John Lautner. Came in, put a tray of slides in the projector, and for 3 hours we were spellbound by all his stories. Amazing guy. So what does that mean for us? Well, I guess we said, okay, we get it. I understand this hillside thing. I understand your envelope. I understand your slope. Let's try it on something we've already built. So we searched around. We found a little hillside property. I think it's like RE9. It's up in the canyon somewhere. And we said, okay, let's build a model. Let's start looking at it. And here's what the color study looks like. Now, we've got software that does this kind of stuff. It's not like we went in and painstakingly hand-colored everything. But each color represents a different slope from that. Remember that little chart we showed with the different angles of slope? And the computer, the reason why they can do this method is because the computer can actually calculate those slopes now. So it calculated the slope, and you get the different colors. And you see the dark colors are bad, and the light colors are good. So we thought, oh boy. So here's the house we put on it years ago. This is going back 10 years ago. And there was our height limit in those days. You had to stay on this rigorous height limit. So you can see the garage had to come down the hill. That driveway was something to build. And then we started putting this slope method in, and their slope method, you can see one little corner of our roof sticks through the slope method, so we don't meet the height criteria anymore. But the other thing you see is, man, we could have put the garage up on the street. That would have been easier. So that little corner, we'd have to lop that off. It might look interesting if we put glass on it or something. I don't know, this won't move. Okay, so the Hillside Ordinance also has things that they'd like to limit, which is lot coverage. They really don't want you to cover more than 40% of the lot area in any case. So if you do a one-story house, you can see it starts to limit how big of a one-story house you can build, depending on the property size, of course. So another thing is grading. And we talked about grading a minute ago, but grading is one of those things that it's part of construction in Hillside. You're going to move dirt. There's no way around it. So they limit how much dirt you can move in the different zones. You can see that. Some of you may not, this chart may mean nothing to you. 1,000 cubic yards. Okay, Rodney, 1,000 cubic yards, big deal. What is that? Well, I can show you there. 1,000 cubic yards on the far right. You see that SUV standing next to it. It's a lot of dirt. Sometimes you see this, you see mountains of dirt on sites, right? You think, what in the world are they going to do with all that dirt? And you see 250 yards, there's a guy standing down there. It's still a pretty big thing. And 1 cubic yard is like up to your waist, a table, 3-foot square table. Another thing that usually gets us in our design work is the off-street parking required in hillsides, because there's a lot of rules that we're not even going to go into today about whether a street's a legal street or substandard street, and you have all those things to contend with, but they want 2 cars parked indoors. And if your house gets over 2,400 square feet, legitimately, they want 3. And then they want a guest. So you start getting into more and more, and although you're exempt for the garages, you do end up building more parking spaces in the hills. Also, fire sprinklers. You all know that already. And the overlay districts are starting to come into play. We've got 2 in play right now, right? Palisades, and the other one is in the valley.
Studio City.
Studio City. Thank you. So we got people that should be up here talking. But the overlay is something to be a little worried about. They are going to allow the overlays to come in and say, okay, that's fine. That's the ordinance. But we want to do something that's even smaller. And by the city, the people in that zone can have a neighborhood meeting and decide that. So those are things to watch out for. So I hope that's allied some of your stuff and help you understand the Hillside Ordinance a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit now in our 4th part here about whether to renovate or build new. And I think that's a tough question. I'm sure you, more than any other contingent of the world, probably hear this more often. People ask you, should I buy this house and tear it down? Should I remodel it? What should I do with this thing? If I'm going to tear it down, can I get it cheaper? Probably heard that a few times, huh? It's a tough question. It's a question that we struggle with as well. There is no magic bullet. There's no easy answer. But I can tell you a few things. One, and there are some things that Brett's been working on that are historic. If it's a historic house and the city has it on their list, you're not tearing it down. And if you're not tearing it down, what do you do with it? Well, there's been some good examples lately of people taking those and making them as good as they can be. But it takes a special client, right, to buy that kind of house. So if it's registered and it's eligible, you're stuck with these options. And these are from the Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C. They've listed out all the things that we can do to historic projects. And we've got a little experience in our office with that, doing these adaptive reuse buildings downtown that are 100+ years old, and how much you touch them and all that sort of thing. So your choices are really preservation, take it back to what it was, precisely. Rehabilitation, fix it some. Restoration, again, take it back to what it was. And then you could add on to it, but you can't wreck the stuff that's there. So it's got to be replaceable. So what does that mean? That's pretty much you're stuck. If you've got a historic house, you're stuck with that choice. You're not going to tear it down. You might move it, right? A lot of those things up in Pasadena got moved, and also in Carroll Avenue, they've moved some of those onto Carroll Avenue actually. So you'll see those. Is it unique? Is the house unique? Maybe not historic. Maybe it's unique. Maybe there's something great about it that you want to keep and make it work. A lot of times, when I say unique, it's irreplaceable, maybe. Stick with it, make it the best it can be, perhaps. It's challenging and it can be expensive. Both of these last two, you can get into some pretty serious money trying to fix what's there, right? So then we got another one, we got another choice, right? Come up. If it's uninspired, I suggest you recycle it. And there's lots of ways to recycle these days. You can take it apart piece by piece. We've done several houses where they literally took every piece out of the house and sent it somewhere and recycled it, sold it, trucked it off to some other country. I don't know what they do with all of it. But they save every single board and nail. Older homes, a lot of times you'll find that they don't fit your client. It doesn't fit their need, their profile. A lot of times the ceilings are low. The rooms are not well shaped. They're in the wrong place. They don't take advantage of some of the siding that you'd like it to take advantage of. There are lots of reasons to tear down a house and build a new one. Price-wise, the sky's the limit. I mean, you can start looking at costs of houses, but it bears a long discussion because there's a lot of different prices, as you all know. If the house has bad bones, as I call it, in other words, it doesn't flow, there's nothing really redeeming about it, it's not good, you're just praying for somebody to tear it down and do something else. That's pretty common. You got to remember, if you're going to remodel a house, everything in the house is probably as old as the house. The house was built in the 40s. You got 60, 70-year-old wiring. You got plumbing that's been hodgepodge over 70 years. You got utility stuff, piping. Everything's kind of at its edge. When they came out of the war, they started building houses all over the valley. They did a good job, but a lot of those are falling apart. People are digging up the slab, cutting up the plumbing, all that sort of thing. So you got to remember that when you're encouraging somebody to just remodel or add on. It can get expensive. So there's lots of horror stories. There's lots of beautiful stories to talk about. But I think, we've been there. Sometimes it ain't pretty when you're trying to renovate. So my advice sometimes is recycle and build new. So here's another example of, if you recycle and build new and you're in the Hillside, what does that mean? That can have some ramifications. This is a three-dimensional plan of what's underground. Same house I showed you before. Little house, less than 4,000 feet. And it costs a lot of money to put all those piles in, friction piles, foundations. And when you're all done, the guy looks at it and says, I paid how many hundreds of thousands of dollars for this, and it's just a piece of dirt. But it's got some rebar sticking out. Hey, look at all that good rebar. And walls. We have limitations on walls too, and that's a whole other discussion, but retaining walls have been radically restricted in the Hillside as well, and that this house could still be built, and pretty much in the same way we built it before, but it would have a little clipped corner. We'd have to do something. But you can see, it starts to affect how you build is all that underground earthwork. So now I'm going to introduce Chris, my partner in business. He's our design partner, and he's going to talk a little bit about our work and show you a couple of slides, and then we're going to open up to questions.
In closing, I just wanted to share some of our work, the work that's relevant to the discussion today. These are projects that, with the exception of one, are all in a Hillside area. And this is something that Rocky and I and the rest of our crew have become experts in over the years, as they're very complex projects. There's only one that's not in the Hillside, but I just wanted to share those with you as they are relevant and offer an exception to renovation. In this case, we've torn them down. They were considered dogs of houses before, and this is what we put in their place to really allow the owner to have the best experience possible in their new home, at their new site. This is we're modern architects, and our range of our work, we have a work that's more of a cooler, modern, temperature cool. This is a project that we did up in Rustic Canyon. It's a 6,900 square foot hillside lot. Not only are we exterior architects, but we are delighting also working on the interiors. We have worked collaboratively with interior designers, with material selections, but in this case, all of the structure that you see are designs that we have come up with collectively with the client. We also take delight in accentuating any of the real exterior features. In this case, we came up with a full design that's quite daring and delightful. Some of our work is very understated. This is on a 1,000 square foot lot, 14,000 square foot home in Santa Monica on a hillside. And as you can see, there's some stepping that had to happen in the city of Santa Monica, which is what Rocky was alluding to before. On the inside, we tried to capture a lot of the natural daylight, rich materials, sort of a layering, healthy environment. We also take delight in the details, working through even the smallest of nuances. We work quite well collaboratively with contractor. I know often that's a very contentious relationship between contractor and architect. We really try to encourage that relationship and foster that relationship, and the product is some beautifully designed and detailed moments in the houses. This is the house that Rocky just showed you on the hillside with all that foundation work. This is the result of it, a lot of indoor-outside relationships, connections back to the site. We also, this as well as in a hillside area, this is, of course, a small project, but this is our fun little tree house. It's in the Mandeville Canyon on a hillside slope. Took a lot of care with all the details. It was a very complex project for a tree house, but it was really, it's gotten a lot of recognition, and appreciation is very enjoying to design. This is the only house that's not on a hillside. This is down in Manhattan Beach. It's about a 4,500 square foot house. Again, we take delight on designing the interiors, warm materials, natural daylighting. These are all things that we think make the experience of living in the house all that more enjoyable. This is the master bathroom, a strong relationship to the outside, warm floors. That glass is electrochromatic, which means it's a privacy glass. You hit a button, it goes opaque so that there's privacy for this bath. At the top level, we have ocean views, warm materials. We work together with an interior designer to manage the furnishings, but all the selections for the wood floors, the windows, and the floors themselves are all our work. And then finally, this is a 3-acre estate up in Brentwood, up in Mandeville Canyon. It's about a 10,000 foot home. We use the color of the eucalyptus tree you can see on the right to influence the actual choice of the color of the material of the wood. We like to use very natural materials such as stone, glass, cast in place concrete, renewable sources like woods, for a softer modern look. People say modern, and often that goes along with kind of a Miami Vice. I live in a white museum, but we like to think of this as a little softer modern. Dramatic inside interior spaces where the outside comes in. We frame these trees in the distance through the stairs. That outside concrete wall comes to the inside. Interior or exterior plazas that run to the interior. And then finally, views out to the adjacent canyons, and it just makes for a very nice outdoor living experience. that's the conclusion of our talk. Thank you.